you can see the question now, again, is a micro version of that same macro question in terms of the okay? We've talked about entrepreneurship and management. Now, I'm going to go through this part very quickly because, again, I'm assuming that you're going to spend in your organizational behavior class and some of those other classes you'll be taking, you will be talking about these in more detail than I'm going to have time to talk about. But there's a couple of interesting debates here. Okay. What we're going to look at, got them all up here. Economic goal of the firm, goals other than profit. So the argument is typical that the firm maximizes profits. What is sort of interesting about this is if you actually run around and you do interviews of firms, particularly managers of firms or boards of directors or whatever, and ask them if you maximize profit, very oftentimes they say they don't. Okay, so this is an interesting argument. What is it, if they don't maximize profit, what is it that they do? So this is an interesting area here. But look, let's cut to the chase. Just like the consumer is not behaving in a random fashion, let's be honest, the firm is not behaving in a random fashion either. Now, whether we say it's maximizing stockholder wealth, whether we say it's maximizing profit, or whether it's maximizing the incomes of the entrepreneurs or the managers, the point I want to make here is that firms, just like consumers, are engaged in purposeful behavior. Therefore, to some extent, this big debate about whether it's profit or sales or however we want to describe it is to some extent a bit silly. Okay? The real issue is that the behavior is purposeful and that you as a manager understand that purposeful behavior. That's part of the corporate culture, and you make decisions. Okay? You make decisions consistent with the goals of the firm. Okay, so we're going to go through this fairly quickly. Okay, and I've just described that. The one thing that is interesting here, and this is a slightly different question, all right, is right here, and that's the principal-agent problem. And this is one of the problems that we do have with corporation. And what we mean is that the principal in a publicly traded company, okay, government-owned company, or a public monopoly. So like in the United States, we have electrical utilities, which are often owned by the state. In the case of a privately traded company, you have two actors. Okay? Let me see if it will let me change color. No, I won't. I'll work on it later. We have the principal and we have the agent. All right? The agent is the manager. The principal are the stockholders. And so the question here, in understanding the goals of the firm and in terms of making decisions, are there cases in which the communication between the principal, the stockholders, and the agent, the managers, are there problems there? And do those problems lead to non-optimal decisions and otherwise causing opportunities, costs to go up, causing profit to the firm, or however you want to measure the firm's objectives to go down? The answer is very possibly yes. And so this is a crucial issue that you will be faced with, okay, and need to be aware of. All right. Two issues here in terms of that are important. There are some market-added and value-added issues. In the United States, because firms are taxed on their profits, firms don't readily report profit because they're making it. One of the interesting things, if you look, I don't know how up you are on movies that are going on, but right now I think worldwide one of the most fantastic movies made a bunch of money is this movie called Avatar, where they've used computer-generated graphics, blah, 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 blah. But if you were actually and James Cameron is the producer, and I would imagine if you were to look at his books right now, okay, that company and that movie's brought in hundreds of millions of dollars. Okay, the answer is how much profit has it made? I think you would see from the books that it probably hasn't made any profit at all on the books. Now, the truth of the matter is, did it make profit? The answer is yes, it did make profit, but because in our country, in the United States, and I would imagine to some extent your countries too, government taxes those profits, then reporting them is something that firms do everything they can. You still have to report them, but there are lots of things you can report as cost, which then cause your profits to, in fact, go down. Now, this shareholder wealth maximization, remember, this gets into that principal agent problem. The principal, the shareholders, would expect the firm to maximize shareholder wealth. The agent, the manager, might, while be interested in that as a goal, may also be more interested in seeing their wages, their salaries go up. Market value added, and then economic value added are some new measures, and you can read them as well as I can talk about them. There are some new ways of looking at how we measure the return to a firm. Okay, so let me move through that. We're getting on. I know it's been a while. I'm my time. Okay, getting towards the end. I'm sure you're getting tired. I'm not going to talk about this. Profit is the difference between revenue and cost received, but in many cases you don't have any. Okay, one thing interesting. Okay, one thing that's very interesting. Okay. First, take a look at these transactions costs. This is something I want you to pay attention to. One of the issues as a manager that you're always confronted with is, should I make whatever it is? So when Coors, for example, we had our own can company. So the aluminum cans that we used to put our beer in to sell to our customers, those were made by a branch of our own company. There were also private companies that could make those cans, and we could buy those cans in the open market if we wanted to. And so as we looked at this question, we were always concerned about the internal transactions cost of making our own cans. But if we went out into the marketplace and bought cans, remember this is make or buy, that we went out in the marketplace to buy these cans, then we would have these transactions costs. And for us, this one and this one is huge. These investigation costs were not that significant because there were not that many companies that made aluminum cans. The only can company that we were interested in the time, and this is the early 1980s, was the American Can Company. But investigation, negotiation, and enforcing the contracts, and particularly ending a contract that was enforceable, became a real big issue to us. And one of the primary reasons, because these transactions costs were so high, it was cheaper for us to do it internally. Now, come back to this. There's a huge question here, all right? One of the mistakes that you'll make is, and we had to pay very close attention to it, if we are making it internally, then we have to estimate what we call the transfer price. And that transfer price is something we're going to look at. Okay, the transfer price. We had to come up with a price, and we would compare that transfer price from our internal division to the price that we would get those cans in the open market, plus the transactions cost involved. All right, so that we're going to come back to later on. That's a big issue. Whenever you have upstream and downstream, we were a completely vertically integrated company. When you have upstream and downstream issues, then this transfer price, it's not just the retail price oftentimes that matters. It's the price of how you transfer inputs within varying parts of your company. So we're going to pay attention to that too. All right. We're not going to, you can read that. Now, this thing here is kind of what I want to talk about briefly. We're going to use, whether you say the first year or whatever, but this idea here is really important, and we're going to come back to this time and time again. What this would be here is like marginal cost, and this is going to be marginal benefit, and this is like value. We're going to use this idea. Here it talks about what is the relationship, the trade-off between transactions cost, okay, and cost of internal operations. So this would be the optimal down here. But this whole idea of marginal cost and marginal benefit, we're going to pay a great deal of attention to. This idea that you're here for the first time, we're going to come back to this a lot. This idea of marginal cost and marginal benefit in terms of allocating things is a huge issue in economics. This is a very important idea.